So we've spent the last couple of classes discussing the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Does anyone remember from last class when apartheid officially ended?
Was it in 1994?
Right. So just before you guys were born, which in the grand scheme of history wasn't that long ago. But the fight against apartheid began way before that, as you guys know, in South Africa. And internationally, it began around the 1950s. So today we're going to talk about the anti-apartheid movement in the United States. I want to begin by discussing two important types of reactions to apartheid that both citizens and U.S. government members did while they were protesting against apartheid. Does anyone have any ideas from the readings you did for class today what one of those types might be?
Well, there were protests.
Exactly. So does anyone remember one big protest that took place that you read about today?
Well, there was a really long protest outside of the South African embassy.
Exactly. So in 1994, there's a picture right here. There was a big group called Trans-Africa that started a protest in front of the South African embassy where South African officials were protesting apartheid. They had signs, they were there every day. And in order to get more press and more publicity, they decided to send people in to try and get into the embassy at night, and those people were arrested, which brought more publicity. Then they brought in some famous people, like Rosa Parks, who you guys have read about for previous classes, to bring even more publicity. Can anyone tell me why Rosa Parks particularly might be special?
She was involved in the civil rights movement.
Yeah, exactly. So here we have protest, which is one form. And like Ada said, she was not just famous, but she was famous for being a huge figure in the civil rights movement, which forced people to make connections between what had happened and what they knew about in the United States and what was happening right now in South Africa, which was kind of cool. It made it more personal for people. So the Trans-Africa protest lasted for 2 long years and had over 4,000 people be arrested, which sparked other protests in different parts of the United States, and the movement grew. So we'll come back to this a little bit later, but right now I want to focus on another form of protest that was used called divestment. So can anyone tell me what divestment is from the readings we have done today?
I mean,
Any ideas?
it has something to do with money, right? Like investments?
Right. So that's close. Juan, do you have any ideas maybe?
Well, it says here that they were trying to get the states and governments to divest.
Yeah. So those were definitely where some of the bigger divestments took place. Alright, so divestment, kind of like Sarahi said, is actually the opposite of investment, which is when you put your money into something. So divestment is taking your money out of a company. Sometimes for a very political reason, sometimes for other reasons, it depends. But in this case, it was usually for political reasons since it was about South Africa. But can anyone think of why this might be powerful, more powerful than a protest? Remember what Alon said, that they were trying to get the U.S. government to divest from companies.
Wait, only companies that were in South Africa, right?
Good point, Sarahi. So this is a very important point to remember. The divestment movement in the United States was about taking money out of companies specifically that were in South Africa. That's why it was political. So the idea was that these companies supported South Africa as a country and its economy, which allowed the apartheid system, which we have learned about, to continue. So what happens if a huge country like the United States takes money out of companies in South Africa?
Well, it shows they don't support apartheid.
Exactly, Alon. So as you guys have read, there was a lot of debate in Congress actually about whether or not to divest and whether or not this was the right thing to do. The first divestment bill, which was put into Congress, was in 1972, but they didn't pass this because they didn't want to divest from South Africa. They thought it was too political. The next one, or the big one that was finally passed, was in 1986, over 10 years later. So this is where we're going to start our activity, and we want you guys to divide into two groups. Wait. Not yet. Let me explain the activity first. So all of you are going to be members of Congress. You know what that means. You have to argue about the bills, decide what you want to do with it. And you have this Anti-Apartheid Act in front of you, which banned a lot of new U.S. investments and trade in South Africa. It was a divestment bill, basically. So we're going to have one group, which is going to be for the bill. So I want you to come up with reasons, both your own and from your readings, for why the bill is a good idea and should be passed. The other group is going to be against the bill. So I want you to come up with reasons why it's a bad idea and the U.S. should have a different policy, a different thing that they want to show the world on their views about South Africa. After the activity, we'll discuss the Anti-Apartheid Act a little bit, so don't worry too much about the details of what actually happens in the Act. For now, just focus